The doors of the throne room open before I am ready for them, and the sound alone makes my heart tighten. Metal grinding against metal, a slow and deliberate noise built to remind every visitor that they are small. I walk forward because stopping is not an option. Behind me, the guards who escorted me from the landing bay stay outside. I am alone now, in a chamber built for a species that measures power in height and shadow. The ceiling stretches so high that the lights near the top look like distant stars. Purple banners hang from the walls, each one stitched with symbols of conquest I do not recognize but understand instantly. Rows of alien nobles line both sides of the long walkway leading to the throne. Their eyes follow me. Some show curiosity, most show contempt. At the far end, seated on a throne carved from black stone, is Empress Valtharian Nice, ruler of the Skarn Dominion. She does not rise. She does not need to. Her presence fills the room the way cold fills an empty house. I keep my pace steady. My boots echo against the polished floor with each step, and I count them silently, the way I have counted steps before every difficult moment of my life. It keeps my mind sharp. It reminds my body that fear is only a feeling, not a command. I stop at the marked line on the floor, exactly where protocol demands, and I offer a formal bow, precise and correct, nothing more and nothing less. Colonel Marcus Cade, a voice announces from beside the throne, a translator device speaking in a flat, mechanical tone, human liaison to the Skarn Dominion. The Empress studies me the way someone studies an insect that wandered into their home. Her eyes, a pale violet color, move slowly across my uniform, across the ribbons, across the medals pinned in neat rows on my chest, each one representing a moment I did not choose but could not walk away from. "So this is what your kind sends us," she says, her voice smooth, almost amused. A soldier dressed like a festival ornament. Laughter ripples through the court. Not loud, not chaotic, but calculated, the kind of laughter that comes from people who know exactly how their ruler wants them to react. I say nothing. I have learned, over many years and many rooms like this one, that silence is often the strongest answer a person can give. The Empress rises now, slowly, descending 3 steps from her throne until she is close enough that I can see the fine detail of her robes, black and violet, stitched with threads that seem to shift color depending on the angle of light. She circles me once, unhurried, inspecting me the way a buyer inspects livestock. "Tell me," she says, stopping in front of me again, "what is this one for?" She taps a gloved finger against a ribbon near my collar. "And this one?" Another tap, another medal. "Did you receive this for standing in a parade? For surviving a training exercise?" More laughter, louder this time. A few of the nobles whisper to each other, clearly enjoying the show. I keep my eyes forward, my spine straight. My jaw is tight, but my voice, when I finally speak, is calm. "Each of these represents a campaign, Your Majesty," I say. "A conflict my people fought and finished." She raises an eyebrow, unconvinced, almost bored by my answer. "Conflict," she repeats, tasting the word like it amuses her. "Your species has only existed among the stars for a handful of decades. What conflicts could you possibly have fought that deserve this much decoration?" I do not answer immediately. I let the question sit in the air, because I know the moment I speak, everything in this room will change. But before I can respond, she turns to her court, gesturing toward me with a dismissive wave of her hand. "This is the great human military," she announces to the room, her voice carrying easily across the vast space. "A species so proud of small victories that it wraps itself in medals like a child wrapped in blankets, pretending the storm outside does not exist." The laughter grows again, sharper now, crueler. Somewhere behind me, I hear the quiet, uncomfortable shifting of my fellow human delegates, standing near the entrance, forced to watch this without being allowed to speak. I think of Elena Marsh, our young diplomatic aide, standing somewhere in that group, her hands likely clenched at her sides. I think of Colonel Nathan Pierce, my old friend and fellow officer, watching this exact scene unfold with the same restrained anger I feel building in my own chest. The Empress steps closer again, close enough now that I can feel the temperature of the room seem to drop. "How many?" she asks, her tone shifting from amusement to something colder, something testing. "How many of these medals represent an actual war? Not a skirmish, not a border dispute, a true war, the kind that shapes the fate of a species." The room grows quiet, waiting. I feel every eye in the chamber settle on me. I feel the weight of decades pressing against my ribs, memories I do not often allow myself to revisit, faces of soldiers I served beside, some who returned home and some who did not. I feel the ghosts of every battlefield stitched invisibly into the fabric of my uniform. The Empress smiles, certain she already knows the answer, certain that whatever number I give her will be small enough to mock, small enough to prove her point in front of her entire court. "Well, Colonel," she says, her voice smooth and dangerous, "how many wars has your fragile little species actually fought?" I take a breath. I let my eyes meet hers directly, without hesitation, without the fear she expects to see. And in that breath, in that single-held moment before I answer, I already know her question is about to unravel everything she believes about my kind. 99, I say. The words leave my mouth quietly, without force, without drama. But the effect on the room is immediate and total. The laughter stops, not gradually, not fading away like laughter usually does. It stops all at once, as if someone reached into the air and switched it off. The Empress blinks. For the first time since I entered this chamber, something other than amusement crosses her face. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief. "Say that again," she says. 99 wars. I repeat, my voice steady. Not battles, Your Majesty, not border disputes. Full wars, conflicts that shaped the future of my species. Each one fought to its end. Each one survived. A murmur spreads through the court, low and uneasy, like wind moving through dry grass. I can see the nobles glancing at each other, some confused, some clearly searching their own knowledge for context that does not exist. Humanity has only been part of the wider galactic community for a short time. Most species here assume our history began the moment we stepped beyond our own solar system. They do not know what came before. The Empress descends the final step toward me, her earlier amusement replaced by something sharper, something more calculating. "That is not possible," she says. "No species survives 99 wars. A species that fights itself that many times destroys itself before it can matter to anyone else. And yet," I say, "here I am, standing in your throne room." Her eyes narrow. I can see her mind working, trying to find the trick, the exaggeration, the diplomatic bluff she assumes I am attempting. But there is no bluff here, only truth, heavier than she expected. "Explain," she commands, her voice sharp now, stripped of its earlier mockery. "Explain how a species claims to have fought 99 wars and still stands before me as anything more than ash." I straighten my shoulders. This is the moment I did not plan for, but somehow always knew would come. Somewhere in this galaxy, someone with power was always going to ask me to explain what my species survived. I did not expect it to be an empress standing above a throne built from black stone, but here we are. "Long before we ever reached the stars," I begin, "my people were divided across a single world. Different nations, different beliefs, different histories that often clashed instead of aligning. We fought wars over land, wars over resources, wars over ideas that seemed small to outsiders but meant everything to the people living through them." I pause, letting the translation catch up, letting the words settle into the minds of everyone listening. "There were wars so large they reshaped entire continents," I continue. "Wars where nations rose and fell within a single lifetime. Wars fought not for glory, but for survival, because the alternative to fighting was disappearing entirely. My people learned, generation after generation, that peace was never guaranteed. It had to be built, defended, and sometimes rebuilt from nothing. The Empress crosses her arms, her expression unreadable now, caught somewhere between disbelief and grudging attention. "You speak as if this is something to be proud of," she says. "A history of constant conflict sounds more like a curse than an achievement." "It is both," I answer honestly. "We are not proud that we fought each other for so long. We are not proud of the lives lost or the mistakes repeated across generations. But we are proud of what came after every single one of those wars. We rebuilt. We adapted. We found ways to live beside people we once considered enemies. Every conflict taught us something about survival that no peaceful era ever could." A noble near the front of the court, an older figure with pale gray skin and deep-set eyes, steps forward slightly. "And what of wars beyond your own world?" he asks, his tone genuinely curious now, cutting through the tension with something closer to real interest. "You said 99. Surely not all of them were fought among yourselves." I turn toward him, grateful for the question, because it opens the door to the second half of the truth. "No," I say, "not all of them. When my species finally reached beyond our solar system, we discovered quickly that the galaxy was not waiting to welcome us with open arms. We encountered threats that had never known resistance before, species and forces that expected easy conquest the moment they found a young civilization stepping into the wider universe. I let the memory rise in my mind, controlled, focused, not letting the weight of it break my composure. There were wars, fought against forces that saw us as nothing more than resources to be harvested," I continue. "Wars fought to protect colonies that had existed for less than a decade, colonies filled with families who had left everything behind for the promise of a new beginning. Wars fought not because we wanted conquest, but because the alternative was extinction." Unquote. The room is fully silent now. Even the Empress, standing just a few steps away, has stopped moving, her earlier hostility replaced by something quieter, something more attentive. "There were wars we should have lost," I say, my voice dropping slightly, not from weakness, but from respect for what I am describing. Enemies with greater numbers, greater technology, greater experience in warfare than we could have hoped to match in those early years. And yet, time and again, my species found a way to endure, not because we were stronger in every measurable way, but because giving up was never something we allowed ourselves to consider. The old noble studies me carefully, his expression shifting from curiosity to something resembling respect. 99 wars, he repeats quietly, almost to himself. "And you count yourself among the survivors of all of them?" "Not all of them personally," I clarify. "Some were fought long before I was born, passed down through history, through memory, through the lessons my people refused to forget. But many, yes. Many of these medals represent conflicts I lived through myself, conflicts I fought in directly, conflicts that took friends from me and left scars I still carry, though not all scars are visible." The Empress finally speaks again, her voice quieter now, though still edged with challenge. "A species that fights this often," she says, "is a species that has never known true peace. What does that say about your kind, Colonel? What does that say about the world you claim to protect?" I meet her eyes without flinching. "It says we understand something many peaceful civilizations never have to learn," I answer. "Peace is not something given. It is something earned, defended, and protected at great cost. We do not celebrate war. We survive it, and then we work harder than anyone else to make sure the peace that follows actually lasts." For a long moment, no one speaks. The Empress studies me in silence, her expression caught between disbelief and something new, something that looks almost like reluctant curiosity. Then, quietly, almost to herself, she says the words that will echo through the rest of this meeting. 99, she repeats. And you are still standing here, unafraid, in the very throne room of an empire that could end your entire species with a single order. Yes, I say simply, because fear was never the lesson those wars taught me, Your Majesty. Endurance was. The silence that follows feels different now, heavier but not hostile. The court that laughed at me only minutes ago now watches with a kind of cautious respect, uncertain how to process a truth this large, this unexpected. The Empress turns away from me slightly, walking back toward her throne, her steps slower than before, as if she is turning the number over and over in her mind, searching for a way to dismiss it, and failing each time. She does not sit. She stands beside her throne instead, one hand resting on its dark stone armrest, staring at me from a distance now, as though the closeness from before suddenly felt unwise. "You expect me to believe," she says finally, "that a species barely known to this galaxy has already survived 99 wars, and yet still stands here today as anything less than broken?" I take a slow breath, feeling the full weight of everything I am about to say next settle across my shoulders. "I do not expect you to believe it, Your Majesty," I answer. "I expect you to understand it. There is a difference." Her eyes narrow again, but this time there is something new hidden behind them. Not amusement, not cruelty, something closer to caution. The silence in the throne room stretches longer than any silence I have experienced in a place like this. No one moves. No one whispers. Even the guards along the walls, tall figures in dark armor who have not shifted their stance since I arrived, seem to be holding their breath. The Empress studies me from beside her throne, her fingers tapping once against the stone armrest before going still again. I can see her mind working, searching for a way to reassert control over a room that suddenly feels less certain of her authority than it did only minutes ago. "You speak of understanding," she says slowly, as though I am incapable of grasping the concept of conflict. "My empire has stood for 1,000 years, Colonel. We have expanded across star systems your species has not yet learned to name. Do not assume ignorance simply because I question your claims." "I am not assuming ignorance, Your Majesty," I answer carefully. "I am offering context. There is a difference between an empire that expands through strength and a species that survives despite constant attempts to erase it." She descends the steps once more, slower this time, her earlier hostility now mixed with something more thoughtful. "Then offer this context," she says. "Convince me these numbers mean something beyond exaggeration." I nod once, and for the first time since entering this room, I allow myself to speak not as a liaison performing diplomacy, but as a soldier recalling truth. "Long before we understood what waited beyond our own sky," I begin, "my people fought among themselves for reasons that seemed small when viewed from a distance, but were never small to those living through them. Wars over land that could feed a family for another season. Wars over beliefs that shaped entire identities. Wars over freedom, when freedom was something entire generations were denied." End quote. I pause, letting the weight of the words settle. "There were wars where brothers fought brothers," I continue. "Wars that tore nations apart from the inside, leaving wounds that took generations to heal. We are not proud of this history, Your Majesty, but we do not hide from it either, because pretending it never happened would dishonor everyone who survived it and everyone who did not." The old noble from earlier steps forward again, standing slightly apart from the rest of the court, his expression thoughtful rather than skeptical. "And when you finally left your world," he says, "these conflicts simply stopped." "No," I answer honestly. "They evolved. When my species finally reached beyond our solar system, we believed, foolishly perhaps, that unity among the stars would come easier than unity on our own world had. We were wrong. The galaxy did not wait patiently for us to mature. It tested us immediately." I think back to those early years, the memories rising unbidden but controlled, disciplined the way years of training taught me to hold them. There were forces that saw a young species stepping into the wider universe and assumed weakness, I continue. They attacked colonies barely established, expecting quick and easy victories. They underestimated something fundamental about my people. We do not surrender simply because the odds are unfavorable. The Empress watches me carefully now, her posture shifting slightly, arms no longer crossed defensively but resting at her sides, listening rather than dismissing. "There was a conflict," I say, choosing my words with care, early in our expansion, against a force that vastly outnumbered us in both ships and experience. They had fought wars across this galaxy for centuries. We had barely fought wars beyond our own atmosphere. By every reasonable measure, we should have lost quickly. But you did not, the old noble says quietly. No, I confirm. We adapted faster than they expected. We learned their tactics within weeks instead of years. We turned every early loss into a lesson, and every lesson into an advantage. By the time that conflict ended, the very forces that once saw us as an easy target had learned to fear the word human whispered among their own ranks. The Empress's eyes narrow slightly, not with hostility now, but with genuine reconsideration. A single victory does not explain 99 wars, she says. No, I agree, but it explains the pattern that followed. Once other forces in this galaxy realized my species would not simply disappear when challenged, some sought alliance instead of conflict. Others, unfortunately, saw us as a threat requiring elimination before we grew too strong to challenge. Both responses led to further wars. Some fought to build relationships, others fought purely to survive attempts at our extinction. I take a breath, feeling the memories grow heavier now as I approach a part of my history I rarely speak of openly. There was a war, I say slowly, against a force that did not seek conquest or resources. They sought erasure. They believed young species like mine represented instability in a galaxy they wished to keep controlled and predictable. They did not want to rule us. They wanted us gone entirely. The room grows quieter still, if such a thing is possible. Even the guards along the walls seem to lean slightly forward, listening. That conflict lasted years, I continue. We lost entire colonies before we found a way to turn the tide. We lost people I served beside, people who believed in a future for our species, even as that future seemed less and less certain with each passing month. But we did not stop fighting for that future, because the alternative was accepting an ending we refused to accept. I look directly at the Empress now, my voice steady despite the weight behind every word. That war ended with our survival, I say. Not our victory in the traditional sense, no grand celebration, no glorious conquest, simply survival. And for my species, survival against forces determined to erase us has always meant more than any conquest ever could. The Empress is silent for a long moment, studying me with an expression I cannot fully read. Finally, she speaks, her voice quieter than before, though still edged with challenge. You speak of these wars as lessons, she says, as though suffering itself becomes valuable simply because you endured it. It is not the suffering that holds value, Your Majesty, I answer. It is what we choose to do afterward. Every war my species fought left scars, some visible, some hidden deep within our history. But after every single one, we rebuilt. We integrated survivors from different sides into a shared future. We found ways to turn old enemies into allies, old wounds into wisdom passed down through generations. I pause, allowing the next words to carry the weight they deserve. That is the pattern behind these 99 wars, Your Majesty. Not endless destruction, endless renewal. Each conflict taught us something the last one could not, and each time we emerged more unified than before, not less. The old noble speaks again, his voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity now rather than skepticism. And what of the wars fought closer to home? He asks. You mentioned early conflicts among your own kind. Did unity ever fully take hold, or does division remain part of your nature even now? It is a fair question, and I consider it carefully before answering. Division will likely always exist among any species capable of independent thought, I say. We are not a perfect people, Your Majesty. We still disagree, sometimes fiercely, about how best to build our future. But the difference now is that disagreement rarely leads to conflict the way it once did. We learned, through decades of loss, that unity does not require identical beliefs. It requires shared purpose. The Empress studies me a moment longer before speaking again, her tone shifting once more, this time towards something almost investigative. "You claim your species learns quickly from conflict," she says. "Prove this claim with specifics. Tell me of a war your people should have lost, and explain precisely how you did not." I recognize the challenge behind her request immediately. She is testing not just my words, but my ability to defend them under scrutiny. I welcome the challenge, because the truth has never needed protection from questions. "There was a conflict," I begin, "fought against a coalition of forces far more advanced than we were at the time. They possessed weapons capable of erasing entire fleets within moments. They possessed strategies refined across centuries of warfare. We possessed determination and the willingness to adapt faster than any enemy expected." I describe, carefully and without embellishment, how early defeats in that conflict forced my people to rethink every assumption about strategy and cooperation. How officers who once operated independently learned to share information instantly across the entire fleet. How engineers redesigned defensive systems in the middle of active conflict, testing new solutions under the worst possible conditions because waiting for safer testing environments was a luxury we did not have. By the time that war ended, I say, the coalition that once expected an easy victory instead found themselves facing a species that had transformed itself entirely within the span of that single conflict. We did not win because we were stronger from the beginning. We won because we refused to remain the same species we were when that war started. The Empress listens without interruption now, her expression unreadable but no longer dismissive. When I finish, she remains silent for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that feels different from the hostility she showed when I first entered this chamber. Finally she speaks, her voice quieter than before, almost thoughtful. 99 wars, she repeats once more, though this time the words carry a different weight entirely. Not disbelief, not mockery. Something closer to genuine reconsideration of everything she believed about the species standing before her. The Empress returns to her throne, but she does not sit immediately. She stands beside it, one hand resting against the dark stone, staring at me with an expression that has shifted entirely from where this meeting began. The mockery is gone. What remains is something more calculating, something searching for a new angle to reclaim the authority she felt slipping away moment by moment. "You paint a compelling picture, Colonel," she says finally, seating herself with deliberate slowness. "A species forged through endless conflict, always emerging stronger, always finding unity through suffering. It is a convenient narrative." "It is not a narrative, Your Majesty," I reply evenly. "It is history." Her eyes narrow slightly. "History can be shaped to serve whoever tells it," she says. "Perhaps what you call resilience, I call instability. A species that fights this frequently has never learned true peace. Perhaps humanity is not a survivor worth respecting, but a threat requiring containment before your patterns of conflict spread beyond your own borders." The words land exactly as she intends them to, sharp and deliberate, an attempt to twist everything I have shared into a weapon against my own people. I feel the shift in the room immediately, several nobles exchanging uncertain glances, clearly reconsidering their earlier sympathy. I do not allow the accusation to shake me. I have faced sharper attacks than words alone. "Containment," I repeat calmly. "Is that truly the lesson your empire has taken from 1,000 years of expansion, Your Majesty? That any species capable of enduring hardship becomes a danger simply because it refuses to be broken?" She leans forward slightly, her expression hardening. "I have watched empires rise and fall across this galaxy," she says. "The ones that survive longest are not the ones who fight constantly. They are the ones who learn to submit before conflict becomes necessary. Peace through order, peace through control. With respect, Your Majesty," I say, my voice steady despite the growing tension in the room. "A peace built entirely on submission is not peace at all. It is silence enforced by fear. My people have lived through both kinds of quiet, the peace we built through unity, and the silence forced upon us by threats determined to see us kneel. We know the difference intimately, and we will never mistake one for the other again." A ripple moves through the court at this, quiet murmurs spreading among the nobles, some clearly uncomfortable with the direction this exchange has taken. The Empress rises again, descending the steps toward me once more, her movements slower this time, deliberate, testing. "Your empire, if one can call it that, is barely a few decades old among the stars," she says. "Mine has endured for 1,000 years without needing 99 wars to prove its strength. What does that tell you about which approach truly succeeds, Colonel?" I meet her gaze directly, refusing to let the challenge unsettle me. "It tells me your empire has never been tested the way mine has," I answer. 1,000 years of dominance built on submission is not the same as 1,000 years of survival against forces determined to erase you entirely. I do not say this as an insult, Your Majesty. I say this because it is simply true. Peace maintained through control has never been tested the way peace maintained through unity has. Her expression tightens, and for a moment I wonder if I have pushed too far. The guards along the walls shift slightly, a subtle change in posture that suggests readiness rather than mere presence. I do not step back. I do not lower my eyes. "You stand in my throne room," she says, her voice low now, edged with quiet threat, "and you dare suggest my empire has never faced true adversity." "I suggest nothing, Your Majesty," I answer carefully. "I simply point out that your empire's strength has never been measured against an enemy willing to erase your entire species rather than negotiate with you. Mine has faced that measurement more than once, and we are still here." The silence that follows feels different from before, heavier, charged with something unspoken. The Empress studies me for a long moment, her earlier composure now replaced by something more complicated, part anger, part reluctant curiosity, part something I cannot quite name. Finally, she speaks again, her voice quieter, though the edge remains. "And if I ordered your immediate removal from this chamber," she says, "what would your 99 wars matter then?" I do not flinch. I have expected this question since the moment I first mentioned the number. "They would matter exactly as much as they do now, Your Majesty," I answer, "because those wars were never fought to earn your approval. They were fought to ensure my species has a future, regardless of whether empires like yours choose to respect that future or not." A long pause follows, the tension in the room now almost tangible. I can feel the weight of every eye upon me, human delegates near the entrance holding their breath, alien nobles caught between fear and fascination, guards awaiting a single command that has not yet come. The Empress studies me carefully, and for the first time since I entered this chamber, I see something shift behind her eyes, something that looks less like anger and more like reassessment. "You are either remarkably brave," she says slowly, "or remarkably foolish, Colonel Cade." "Perhaps both, Your Majesty," I reply. "My people have often been accused of the same thing throughout our history. Bravery and foolishness frequently look identical from the outside. The difference only becomes clear afterward, once the outcome is known." Something almost resembling amusement flickers across her expression, though it is far more restrained than the mockery she displayed earlier. She studies me a moment longer before turning slightly toward her court, addressing them directly rather than me. "This human claims his species has survived 99 wars," she announces, her voice carrying across the chamber. "He claims resilience, where I see recklessness. He claims unity, where I see chaos, narrowly avoided time and again. Tell me, honored members of this court, does such a history inspire confidence, or does it confirm exactly the instability I warned against?" The chamber remains silent for a long moment. I brace myself, uncertain which direction the court's judgment will fall. But then, unexpectedly, the old noble who questioned me earlier steps forward once more, his voice steady and clear. "Your Majesty," he says, "in my centuries of service to this court, I have studied the histories of countless species across this galaxy. Few possess the kind of resilience this human describes. Most empires that face repeated existential threats eventually crumble under the weight of constant conflict. This species has not crumbled. If anything, their history suggests the opposite. Perhaps instead of viewing this as instability, we should view it as evidence of a species uniquely suited to enduring hardship the rest of us have never truly faced. The Empress turns sharply toward him, clearly not expecting this response. "You defend him?" she asks, her tone sharp. "I defend the truth as I understand it, Your Majesty," the noble replies calmly. "Nothing more." The room shifts again, subtle but unmistakable. Several other nobles now exchanging glances that suggest reconsideration rather than dismissal. The Empress notices this shift as well, her expression tightening with barely restrained frustration. She turns back to me, her composure regained, though something beneath it feels less certain than before. "Very well, Colonel," she says. "You have made your case eloquently, but eloquence alone does not prove strength. Words are easy, survival is difficult. Convince me, truly convince me, that these 99 wars represent something more than fortunate outcomes strung together by circumstance." I take a steady breath, feeling the moment settle into something far more important than mere diplomatic exchange. This is no longer simply about defending my medals or my history. This is about defining, in this single moment, exactly what humanity represents to a galaxy still learning to understand us. "Your Majesty," I begin, my voice carrying clearly across the silent chamber, "allow me to explain not just how we survived these wars, but why survival was never in question to begin with." Survival was never in question, I continue, because my species never viewed any of these wars as something we might lose without also finding a way forward. That distinction matters more than most outsiders realize. We did not survive these conflicts through luck, Your Majesty. We survived them because giving up was never part of how we understood ourselves." Unquote. The Empress watches me closely now, her earlier frustration replaced by focused attention, waiting for whatever comes next. "Consider the nature of resilience itself," I say. "Your empire has stood for 1,000 years through order and control, and that stability has value. I do not deny this. But stability built without testing rarely reveals what a civilization is truly capable of enduring. My species has been tested constantly, sometimes by our own divisions, sometimes by forces beyond our world entirely. Each test forced us to discover strength we did not know we possessed until circumstance demanded it." I pause, allowing the weight of the next words to settle carefully. "There is a particular kind of knowledge that only comes from nearly losing everything and finding a way through anyway," I continue. "It cannot be taught through theory. It cannot be inherited through peaceful centuries of dominance. It can only be earned through the exact kind of struggle my species has faced again and again, 99 times, to be precise." The old noble who spoke in my defense nods slowly, clearly following the logic, while several other members of the court lean forward slightly, listening with genuine attentiveness now, rather than performative interest. "You spoke earlier of containment," I say, turning my attention back to the Empress directly. "Of viewing resilience as instability requiring control, I would ask you to consider a different perspective. A species capable of enduring 99 wars and emerging each time more unified, more adaptable, and more determined to build a better future is not a threat to be contained. It is a potential ally whose strength has already been proven under conditions your empire has never faced." The Empress remained silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable, though the earlier hostility has clearly faded into something far more contemplative. "An ally," she repeats slowly, testing the word. "You believe humanity deserves alliance rather than vassal status beneath this empire. I believe humanity has already earned respect through actions your empire has not yet had reason to witness," I answer carefully. "Vassal status was accepted after our recent conflict with your forces, Your Majesty, not because we lacked the will to continue resisting, but because we recognized the value in seeking peace when peace remained possible. That choice was not weakness. It was wisdom learned through 99 previous conflicts, each one teaching us that unnecessary continuation of war serves no one, especially when alternative paths remain open. The Empress studies me carefully, clearly reconsidering the entire framework through which she has viewed humanity since this meeting began. "You suggest your submission was strategic rather than forced," she says slowly. "I suggest it was both, Your Majesty," I reply honestly. "We were outmatched in that particular conflict. This is true. But accepting terms rather than continuing indefinitely was a choice informed by decades of understanding when continued conflict causes more harm than resolution. We chose peace, not because we could not continue fighting, but because we understood, better than most species could, the true cost of choosing otherwise." A long silence follows, the entire chamber holding its collective breath as the Empress processes everything laid before her. She rises from her throne once more, descending the final steps slowly, stopping directly in front of me, closer than she has stood since the meeting began. "You are unlike any representative I have received from a vassal species," she says quietly, her voice carrying only to those closest to us. "Most arrive frightened, eager to please, desperate to avoid offending an empire capable of ending their existence with minimal effort. You arrived prepared to be mocked, and instead of retreating into apology, you turned my own court's judgment against itself. I did not arrive seeking conflict, Your Majesty," I answer honestly. "I arrived prepared to represent my species with the truth, regardless of how that truth was received." She studies me a moment longer, something shifting behind her eyes that I cannot fully name, respect perhaps, or something adjacent to it, cautious and unfamiliar even to her. "99 wars," she says once more, though this time the words carry an entirely different weight than when she first repeated them in disbelief. "And you stand before me today, still willing to speak honestly to power that could destroy your entire species without hesitation." "Yes, Your Majesty," I answer simply. "Why?" she asks, and for the first time, the question feels genuine rather than rhetorical. Why risk offending an empire capable of ending your future entirely, rather than simply telling me what I wish to hear? I consider the question carefully before answering, because it deserves an honest response rather than a rehearsed one. Because every one of those 99 wars taught my species the exact same lesson, Your Majesty, I say. Survival built on false comfort never lasts. Peace built on dishonesty always collapses eventually, often at the worst possible moment. My people learned, through great cost, that honesty, even when dangerous, protects a future far better than convenient lies ever could. The Empress remains silent, absorbing this response fully, before finally turning away from me, walking slowly back toward her throne. She does not sit immediately. She stands beside it, staring out across her court, clearly processing everything that has unfolded within these final moments. Finally she speaks, her voice carrying across the chamber, addressing not just me now, but her entire court. "This human colonel arrived today, wearing medals I assumed represented insignificant achievements," she says. "I assumed his species, young and unfamiliar to this galaxy, possessed nothing worth genuine respect. I was wrong." The words land with unmistakable weight, and I can feel the shift in the room instantly, nobles exchanging glances of surprise, some even nodding slowly in quiet agreement. 99 wars, the Empress continues, represent not weakness, as I initially assumed, but a resilience this empire has rarely witnessed in any species we have encountered. Perhaps humanity's history is not evidence of instability, but evidence of a species uniquely capable of enduring hardship most civilizations never survive. She turns back toward me, her expression calmer now, though something guarded remains behind her eyes, an Empress unwilling to fully surrender authority, yet clearly no longer viewing me, or my species, through the same dismissive lens as before. "I will not pretend this conversation has changed everything between our peoples in a single moment," she says. "Vassal status remains, for now, but I will reconsider how this empire chooses to engage with humanity moving forward. Perhaps a species that has survived what yours has survived deserves more than mere observation from beneath this throne. I bow slightly, formal and precise, acknowledging her words without offering false gratitude, because gratitude was never the goal of this meeting. Understanding was. "Thank you, Your Majesty," I say simply. "My people ask only for the respect our history has earned, nothing more." She studies me a final moment before gesturing toward the doors behind me, a silent dismissal, though far different in tone than the one that greeted my arrival. I turn, beginning the long walk back down the chamber, past nobles who now watch me with expressions entirely different from the mockery that greeted me upon entry. Near the entrance, I catch sight of Elena Marsh and Colonel Nathan Pierce, both watching with quiet astonishment, clearly processing everything that unfolded in this room over the past hour. Before stepping through the doors, I stop, turning back toward the throne one final time. The Empress watches me from her seat, her expression unreadable, though no longer hostile. I raise my hand in a slow, formal salute, the same gesture given at the conclusion of every conflict my people have ever fought, a gesture that carries the weight of every soldier who did not return home, every colony rebuilt from ruins, every generation that refused to let hardship define their future beyond what they chose to build from it. The throne room remains silent as I hold that salute, and in that silence, I feel something settle within me, a quiet confirmation that today, for the first time in this chamber, humanity was not mocked. We were understood. I lower my hand, turn, and walk through the doors without another word, leaving behind a throne room that will remember this day far longer than the Empress who ruled it ever expected. Outside, the corridor stretches long and quiet ahead of me, but for the first time since arriving in this empire, the silence following me does not feel like judgment. It feels like respect, earned the only way my people have ever known how to earn it, through truth, through endurance, and through 99 wars that shaped not just my history, but the unbreakable will of everyone who came after them.